How's it going, guys? This is Al. We're back for week 4. Going to take a first look at the NFL lineup right here on Draftkings.com. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you guys being here. This video has done tremendous each of the first 1, 2, and 3 weeks in terms of views, and that comes down to you guys. Really appreciate y'all being here. Please drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, click the notifications bell, leave a comment down below, let me know what you think, all those sorts of things, right? Y'all know the drill. You know what to do. Let's just get to the video. So we got the Millie Maker for week 4. It's going to be a $10 entry fee this week. It's usually $20, so they kind of changed it up a little bit. You're going to have to beat a lot more runners in order to get there. $1 million of that goes to first place, obviously, that $4 million in the prize pool. I think it'll fill. I don't think there's any chance that it overlays. So let's get that out of your mind real quick. We're going to start with quarterbacks. Okay, Aaron Rodgers against Buffalo. He's amazing. He's Aaron Rodgers. He's a bad man, all that sorts of stuff. Tom Brady against Miami. Sure, Drew Brees has been lighting up everybody the last 3 weeks, and he's funneled his targets basically down to 2 guys. It's Kamara and it's Michael Thomas. So if you've played that triple the last 3 weeks, that's done extremely well in tournaments. My best ball teams where I have that triple stack have done very well. Those are the leagues that I'm doing best in. To be honest with you, the ones where I had Kamara in the first round, reached up to get Breeze, and then had Michael Thomas coming back in the second. Those teams have been doing very well, and they've been crushing in daily fantasy too. I think they're viable for tournaments. Not really the route that I go in cash. You guys know that I like to pay down in cash, right? So like Phillip Rivers, solid. Deshaun Watson, still only 6,300. He's in consideration for cash games for me because of this. He has not looked good the last 2 weeks. He has not had a rushing touchdown in any game this year. He is still averaging 23 fantasy points a game on DraftKings, so he has to be in your, in your consideration for cash games. This guy is not going to go the season without rushing for a touchdown. He'll probably have between 3 and 6 rushing touchdowns on the year if he can stay healthy, but multiple touchdowns in each of his last 2, 300 yards in each of his last 2, now squaring off against an Indianapolis Colts defense that has looked very good against the pass, but does not have the personnel, in my opinion, to stop Hopkins or Fuller and all the other weapons that Deshaun Watson has at his disposal and with his legs. So he presents a different problem for that defense than some of the other quarterbacks that they've faced so far. I think he's in cash game consideration for this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick looked great through first 2 games. I'm recording this before Monday Night Football, so if he has another 4-touchdown game, I'm still going to fade him against the Chicago Bears. The Bears, one of the best defenses in the league, and going to be at home. This is not a spot where I want to pay up over $6,000 for Fitzpatrick. I'd much rather have Watson. I'd much rather have Matt Ryan at 6,100. If you want to go with Fitzpatrick in tournaments, that's on you. I'm going to focus on these 2 guys right here. Matt Ryan kind of blew my philosophy that he's the 275-yard guy pretty much every week out of the water. At least he didn't run for a touchdown in week 3. Week 4, you still got a solid matchup in a game that I think is kind of a sneaky shootout in the dome here. We've had some weather issues on a couple of games every single week so far. Wentz, not really buying yet, and especially not against this Tennessee defense. I might change my mind as the week goes on because his price isn't all that high at $5,800, but Tennessee's been tough. For each of the last couple of weeks that we thought they weren't going to be that good on defense, they've looked quite good. Matt Stafford against Dallas, I'm interested. I'm not thrilled, especially not for cash. Garoppolo getting injured kind of sucks. Eli Manning, I'm probably not going to play Eli Manning much at all, even though New Orleans has looked terrible. I will invest in his receivers, though. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Russ Wilson hasn't looked great. Not shocking. Right? He's still a great quarterback. He's thrown for multiple touchdowns each of the first 3 weeks, but he doesn't have the weapons to just rack up yards. No more Jimmy Graham, no Baldwin, and that offense just doesn't look great, and they want to funnel it through the running back as Chris Carson had over 30 touches in week 3. Ryan Tannehill, not somebody that I ever really play, even though he's actually looked quite good, especially with guys like Jakeem Grant. But like you see here, quarterback success in fantasy is not tied to volume. It's more tied to efficiency. Multiple touchdowns in each of the first 3 games for Ryan Tannehill, but at the same time, he's not throwing the ball enough for me. No game with 30 attempts at all. So you look at the guys who did well for us in week 2, right? And it's not a big difference. 17 completions for Tannehill in each of the last 2 weeks. Patrick Mahomes, 28 points on 24 completions last week. Deshaun Watson, 29 points on 24 completions last week. Matt Ryan, 43 points on 26 completions last week. If Ryan Tannehill would get 25 completions, this would be a totally different story. But they're not throwing the ball a ton. They're running it and they're pounding it, and those touchdowns are not going to be sustainable on that little amount of work, even though he's completed a ridiculously high 72% of his passes so far this year. Not really the guy that I'm looking at. There's two guys that I'm going to look at this week. And by the way, I'm off the Andrew Luck train. Okay? I know he threw for 300 yards in week 1, but I think that more of his outputs are going to look like this. They're just not letting him throw the ball downfield, whether or not he can, whether it's just a shoulder issue, whether it's just his arm that doesn't let him do it. They pulled him on a Hail Mary attempt this week. That, to me, was all I needed to see. He's not going to be able to throw the ball deep to give you the opportunity a really big week. That's my issue with Luck. But there's two guys I'm considering. Number one, Andy Dalton against Atlanta. We're gonna go through this. Obviously, you're gonna see that I do like certain guys. I think there's gonna be easy catches and yards that come against Atlanta for running backs. We've seen that each of the last 2 weeks with Alvin Kamara catching 15 balls in week 3. And CMC catching 14 balls in week 2, and Gio Bernard likely to be the guy unless Joe Mixon can make his way back from an injury. Andy Dalton's going to have a lot of easy receptions. He's also got Tyler Boyd on the outside, who remains too cheap. He's got A.J. Green, one of the best weapons in the league. He's got John Ross to at least keep safeties off the line. And Atlanta suffered another season-ending injury to one of their safeties. That middle of that defense is extremely depleted from what it was supposed to be before, when they were still allowing catches to running backs. Now they are allowing catches and they can't tackle. So a lot of easy yards and completions for Andy Dalton this week, and a high upside with a good floor with no pound-it running back on this team. He's going to have to throw it to be effective. And Baker looked damn good last week, getting the Browns their first win. Coming in relief for Tyrod Taylor, who got a concussion, looked the part 100% of the time. Kid was throwing darts out there. He's 5,300 against Oakland, who is a defense that I think is extremely attackable for quarterbacks. They're going to spread it out. They're going to let him throw it. They're going to have open lanes for the running backs to run. I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to deal with what Baker Mayfield can do. I don't think that he's going to throw for 350 yards. Now, granted, this 200 yards came with him chasing, right? They were behind in that game and they had to catch up. So they may not let him go as much, kind of Sam Darnold-ish, where they're going to keep him to 25 or 27 attempts, I would assume. But when he gets back there, this kid can sling it. He's got a couple of guys like Landry. He utilized Njoku very well during the preseason. I think he can get the most out of those two. And then Callaway is very explosive as a rookie. And then Higgins is solid, if unspectacular, as well. I think he's got some weapons that can make things go. 275 yards and multiple touchdowns in play for me for Baker Mayfield at 5,300. I'm going to start with Andy Dalton. I'm not going to go with the clickbait Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield in week 4. But Gio Bernard's definitely getting in there. 6,300. Look at the running backs real quick. Let's take Bernard out of there. Look at the running backs from 7K to 6,500. Out, fine. David Johnson. Can we talk about him for a second? I need to collect myself. Calm blue ocean. Serenity now. Because getting David Johnson 16 touches is just not enough. He needs to touch the ball 25 times a game if the Arizona Cardinals are going to have any hope of being effective on offense. Oh, we're going to get David Johnson a lot more touches this week. We're going to get him involved in the passing game. We're going to move him around on the field. And then you look at the next-gen stats where it tracked his routes and what he ran. They did exactly not that. Even though he did catch that one touchdown, they did not utilize him any differently than they did the previous 2 weeks. He had 14 touches in week 1. He had 14 touches in week 2. He had 16 touches in week 3. This is unacceptable. If there is a buy-in spot, it's now. I think he is somebody that I'm going to want to overweight in tournaments. I don't know if I want him in cash games yet. Because as you all know, I want 20 touches minimum from my running backs. And I just don't trust this Arizona Cardinals coaching staff to get the ball into one of the best weapons the NFL has ever seen's hands 20 plus times a game from where I'm sitting on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I want to love David Johnson this week. Let me love David Johnson this week, please. Let me get him into my lineup, coaching staff in Arizona, offensive coordinator, running backs coach, whoever's game planning. Can you please just give your best weapon the ball 20 plus times and let the rest sort it out? End rant. Joe Mixon out, Giovanni Bernard, Freeman out, Coleman, Ingram suspended, Breida, McCoy out last week. We'll see if he's still out. Jay Ajayi out last week. Look at all the injuries in this range from 55 to 7K. This is going to create a large gap where you either pay for the high price guys or you have to find value. And on Monday mornings, it's very hard to find value, so we end up going for guys in the mid-range. So Giovanni Bernard, definitely a play. San Francisco not doing a bad job of getting Breida the ball. I would love to see more touches, but getting 13 touches out of Matt Breida is pretty solid, and he's done everything that he possibly can with all of those touches. 26-yard, busting a 26-yarder this week, a 66-yarder last week. This average yards per carry kind of begs the question, why aren't you getting this kid the ball more? And Alf Morris kind of vultured that touchdown this week. I expect a few more catches, a couple of more this week, especially since the change in quarterback. Okay, we have to talk about this. With Garoppolo possibly out for the season, they're going back to Beathard at quarterback. Beathard last year, go look at what happened when he was the quarterback. He doesn't really attack downfield. He can't really attack downfield all that often. So when you get him in there, look at what happened to Carlos Hyde's targets per game. They went off the charts for a 6-week stretch where he was basically one of the top 3 or the leading target getter for running backs in the NFL in the weeks that Beathard was the quarterback. Okay, now Beathard's back at quarterback. Alf Morris can't catch the ball. So assuming that Breida is going to get possibly 50 to 100% more targets per game than he has been getting the first 3 weeks is not outlandish to me. He's somebody that I'm watching right now, but I don't know if I want to plug him in because at 5,800, he's going to have to get that sort of involvement to pay off that salary. We need, 15 to 20 fantasy points out of him to feel good at 5,800. At the work rate that he's getting right now, I don't know that he can get there. If he gets bumped up to 7 or 8 targets a game, which I think he could, then for me at 5,800, he becomes a good value. But let's just keep looking for somewhere else. Now, I guess I kind of buried the lead. I do want to play running backs against San Francisco. I always want to play Alvin Kamara. I think that the price difference here is massive, especially for a Monday. Melvin Gordon, and I think it comes down to 2 guys right now for me in this first look lineup at my high-priced running back. And we might be able to get 2 in there. We'll see. Melvin Gordon, at 8,300 with his involvement in the passing game and his involvement in the running game and his involvement inside the 10-yard line for this Chargers offense is phenomenal. And against San Francisco, who has still not proven that they can stop the run, is the first guy that I want to plug in. What we've seen from Saquon Barkley is that he is every bit of the explosive runner that we thought he would be coming out. You can make I'm not even talking about was it a good draft pick, versus what else they could have had and blah, 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 blah. That's an argument for a different day at a different barbershop. This is what I like in terms of fantasy. He's getting as many targets as he can handle. He's getting a good amount of rushes. He's getting the goal line. And he's been over 20 fantasy points every single week at 8,100. If I can fit both him and MG3, I like it. I don't know if we can fit him. We'll find out after we take a look at the wide receivers. This might be a week to pay down at wide receiver. Howard against Tampa Bay at 6,800. I still think he's getting all the volume that I want out of him. And he's getting involved in the passing game. He has not been scoring a ton of touchdowns because this Bears offense isn't as dynamic as some of the other offenses in the league. But I do like him as well. Tevin Coleman got another 15 carries this week after 16 the week before, 3 targets, only 5,900. I think that he's in play against Cincinnati here. I'm not sure that I want to play both running backs from this game, but if it's a salary decision, I'm not against it. If you want to play the route that they're going with a rookie quarterback against Oakland, and Carlos Hyde should see all the volume that he can handle, I'm not against that either. I don't think it's a narrative. You've seen him get over 20 carries twice already at 5,500. I think I like him better than Tevin Coleman. Coming down a little bit, Carson got a ridiculous amount of volume this week and goes up against Arizona, who has not been able to stop the run. At 4,600, I like the value here. Sony Michel, how do y'all feel about Sony Michel? I think White was the guy, to be honest with you. White right now looks like the dude to own in the New England backfield. You know, he just looks like he's got a solid role, carving out 15 points a week, but at 5,400, I don't know that we can really bank on that. Again, we're not getting a ton of touches here, and I think that there are better guys in that mid-range. I would rather have Carson than him, but we'll see if we need that cheap running back or if we can pay up. Let's take a look at wide receivers. Michael Thomas has been every bit of the breakout that we hoped he could be in preseason, getting, 40 targets through 3 weeks? If they keep him in double-digit targets every week, he's fantastic. Hopkins against Indianapolis. Not sure that Indy can stop him, getting 10 targets a week from a very dynamic quarterback. Like him. Keenan Allen against San Francisco. Love the supply, and I think that it bumps higher. He's had a tough matchup the last couple weeks. Julio Jones, don't throw any tomatoes. This could be a flop lag week for Julio Jones because the squeaky wheel could get the grease. No touchdowns through 3 weeks, and the volume has decreased each of those weeks. And last week, we saw the shadow cornerback Lattimore go off of Julio Jones in the second half because they just were ignoring him, and they put him on Ridley for at least half the snaps. So teams are starting to recognize what Sark is doing in Atlanta and going away from Julio more than going to him. You need to force feed Julio Jones 10 to 12 targets a week if you're the Atlanta Falcons, and they're just not doing it. Mike Evans, not really. Adams, always a touchdown candidate. Touchdown every single week. Been really solid. Always under-owned. 7,800. I think he makes for more of a tournament play for me, though. Jarvis Landry. I love this volume. Everybody has these preconceived notions about what Jarvis Landry is because of what he was early in his career in Miami, and they haven't noticed the ascension that he's made over the past 3 seasons in terms of his yards per target, in terms of his usage in the red zone, and now on the Cleveland Browns, not running those just around the first 5 yards low A-dot routes. He's getting downfield a little bit more, and he definitely has the capability to capitalize on it. At 7,400, though, it's a much bigger decision to make than down there. T.Y. Hilton, probably not going to invest in him this week. Will Fuller, I like, especially with the target volume that he's getting. This is much more palatable for me, this targets column. Everybody that watched me for the last few years knows that I have never really bought into Will Fuller because he just doesn't get the volume, right? He was getting 4, 5 targets a game, catching 2, maybe 3 balls because they're all downfield throws. If Will Fuller's going to get 8, 9, 10, 11 targets a week, then I'm on Will Fuller because I want volume, and he is now getting volume, and he still has that big playability with a 37-yard catch and a 39-yard catch each of the last 2 weeks. He still has that downfield ability, but now he's got a much higher floor. So you have less of a boom bust possibility from Will Fuller as long as his targets remain at this level. And you have more of a high floor, high ceiling player, kind of a la Tyreek Hill. Not the same player. I'm not saying he is Tyreek Hill, but with Tyreek Hill getting 27% of the targets now, I like Tyreek Hill a lot more than I liked him in the past as well. Kenny Golladay at 6,500. Interested in him against Dallas as well. He's probably my favorite wide receiver on Detroit. Golden Tate still getting a lot of targets as well. They just throw the ball a ton. Obviously, they ran for 100 yards last night on Sunday Night Football, but not really something that I'm going to bank on every single week out of that offense. I think the most interesting wide receivers this week are in the 4 to 5K range. New Orleans' second cornerback, Lattimore, is really, really good, right? And he's going to be probably shadowing Odell Beckham Jr. this week. Doesn't mean that Odell can't beat him, right? That New Orleans pass defense has been horrific, but mostly with their secondary cornerback who's allowed more yards than any other cornerback has allowed so far this year. Fantasy points per opportunity, fantasy points per target, just terrible. Shepard at 4,900. I believe my chat was saying that Ingram might be out in week 4 as well. Shepard becomes a really, really, really favorable play at 4,900 for me and gives us the value that we might want so that we could jump up and go grab that high-priced flex play. If I can grab a whole bunch of targets with with my wide receivers for not a lot of money, I'm going to want to do that. We did it last week with Tyler Boyd. He's still too cheap. 4,600 against Atlanta, who has also not really been able to stop anybody. A touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. 16 targets over the past 2 weeks. playing out of the slot, Ross playing outside, and mostly being a decoy just running a 9. Ross is essentially the NFL version of the seagulls in Finding Nemo. But instead of mine, he just says 9. He goes to the huddle, and Dalton looks at him and says, okay, John, what are you running? 9? 9? 9? You're just running down the field every single time, and Tyler Boyd, not getting double covered, is seeing a whole lot of space out of the slot. And I really, really like Tyler Boyd once again at 4,600, especially for this first look. Quincy Nunwa, another one. I know the matchup is bad. I do. But the amount of targets that he's getting and the type of targets that he's getting are impossible to stop that amount of supply. Jacksonville's defense is one that I have tremendous respect for, and I usually just avoid players playing against them. But getting to 12 or 13 fantasy points is not going to be all that difficult for Quincy Enunwa based on the fact that he's being force-fed targets by a rookie quarterback that they're not really letting throw the ball downfield all that often and trying to move the ball by just kind of throwing little screens, little bubbles, little jailbreaks, little slants to Quincy Enunwa, and then they kind of go over the top with play action. Enunwa's in play for me at 4,300, but let's see if I want to plug him in as a third guy or if we can come down a little bit more. I always say I don't like running my head into a brick wall. I don't, but that's a different story, right? Like, I think that not all targets are created equally. And I don't think he's going to get shadow treatment because you can't really, Jalen Ramsey isn't going to follow Quincy Enunwa around the field. I think that Robbie Anderson could see way more of Jalen Ramsey than Enunwa. Who else? Wilson has done well, but not really getting the volume. I think that he's fool's gold. As much as I like him in best ball for the price that he was this year, he's not somebody that I'm really going to target. Jakeem Grant, been doing great things with very little volume as well. Not really buying in on low volume guys. Not the way that I kind of play the game. Tavon Austin, same idea. Low volume guy. Big upside if he breaks a play, but I'm not thrilled with 2 and 3 targets. Higgins, same idea, 3 targets. 4,300 looks good, though. Now, they were chasing in this game, right? Last week when he got 10 targets. He might drop back down to 4, but it's more realistic to think that with Baker Mayfield at quarterback, who's going to test secondaries way more than Tyrod Taylor was willing to test secondaries, that Antonio Callaway could fall between 6 and 8 targets this week, right? If you don't want to bang your head up against that Jacksonville Jaguars brick wall and want to go for somebody who might have a higher upside because of his downfield threat with a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, all of a sudden, this kind of is opening some things up. Let's plug in our 3K defense. I don't really see one. All right, Bears. I randomly clicked. All right, I like the Bears defense, actually. So I think they might be pretty chalky this week at home against Tampa Bay and Fitz. Looking at tight ends now. This is where we could open up some more salary to maybe get up because this is where I usually pay 3K to 4K for my tight end unless it's a special week. Zach Ertz against Tennessee. Tennessee been very, very tough on defense. Gronk is Gronk, but I forget. Does Gronk have great splits against Miami or not? Chat, they call me Trey, says, Smiz, every week on Oakland, one player goes off. Cook, Cooper, Nelson. Is Bryant next? I don't know. Gronk just not getting Gronk supply, right? He just isn't. He's not getting those 7, 8, 9 targets. He got 8 week 1, and look what he did. He got 4 against Jacksonville, understandable, with Jalen Ramsey spending a lot of time. And against Detroit, he got 5. Maybe that's because Matt Patricia, former defensive coordinator for the Patriots, understands how to funnel targets away and went with that Patriot philosophy of take away the other team's favorite toy, right? And so Gronk is Brady's favorite toy, make him use other people. It worked, whatever it was. Kittle at 4,200. Shower narrative? Is the shower narrative back in play here? You're going to get a ton of targets, although not having Garoppolo there kind of hurts him, but in terms of having downfield threat. But at 4,200, I think that he's in play. Jared Cook, just kind of getting his 4, 5, 6 targets a week. Do not expect this. Like, everybody week 1 was like, oh, they're going to totally feature him. No, they're not. Evan Ingram, questionable. Considered week to week. We'll have to monitor this as the week goes on. If he's out, Shepard becomes uber chalk. Trey Burton, 3,900 again, living in that 4, 5, 6 target range. I don't hate him. Eric Ebron, though, probably going to be the chalk. If Jack Doyle is out, which he was this week, right? He's got a hip injury. He was out in week 3. If he is out again in week 4, Eric Ebron once again will be the chalk. And here's why. 11 targets. 3 of those were in the end zone that were not completed. He is getting massive usage. I think he played like 90 or 95% of the snaps in week 3. Only ended with 8.3 points. The process was right in going with Eric Ebron. If you went with him in your cash games last week, I opted to go higher and paid up for Kelsey because I just didn't trust him because I never trust Eric Ebron. But for a first look lineup at 3,600, I mean, I kind of want to plug him in. Unless there's somebody else like David Njoku. But I've already got a Brown. I'm not going to go with 2 Browns in one lineup, considering what I expect their team total to be. But David Njoku definitely in play at 3,200 with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Will Dissly, no thank you. ASJ, no thank you. Hooper, you're never going to get a lot of... Like, Hooper just is what he is. You're getting 4 or 5 targets, and you better hope he catches a touchdown, because that's the only way he's going to smash value. He's not going to catch long touchdowns. He's not a threat down the field. He's a big, around the line of scrimmage, tight end. That's just kind of what he is. RSJ caught a touchdown this week, so people are going to, start taking victory laps on him. He had 3 more targets, guys. I think Ebron's the best play, at least where I'm sitting on Monday. That leaves me with 10K. I have 10K to spend. I could just plug in Alvin Kamara and call it a day. We could do that. But let's take a deeper look. We may end up doing that. Let's take a little bit of a deeper look. Let's see what we can do with Barkley. If we get Barkley in there, can we move Callaway up? What can we afford at 6,200? Josh Gordon, Edelman, A-Rob. I don't love it. It really doesn't help me improve much there. It doesn't. I'm just plugging in Alvin Kamara. I'm going to let somebody else figure out where to get their, 12 targets from. Looks easy to me, guys. Things will change. This is not a final lineup. Please do not expect this to be the lineup that you are definitely going to be playing on Sunday. News will break. I will be out with an article on Thursday. I will be out with a podcast on Thursday. Friday, you can join me on Twitch for the, for the Q&A. I'll spend an hour talking to you, taking your questions. We'll break down the news just like we did last week when all that injury news broke right before we went live. And then Sunday morning before lock, the Anti-Tinkercast on twitch.tv/Al_Smizzle. Come join us and see how the news breaks and how it changes, because this lineup may be viable Sunday and it may not. So please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click on one of the other videos. Do me a solid, and I'll catch up to you guys later. Bye, guys.